we were just saying there were moments in it where, because it was so meta, we were using all our names, and um, we had to be, you described it as like peeling the onion layers back.
I'm excited today to be chatting with Jeremy Schuetze and Antonia Thomas, the stars and director-writer of ANACORETA. Thank you both for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks for having us.
Absolutely, this film is a blast. It is an absolute blast. The ground shifts beneath your feet every possible moment. Um, where did it come from?
It came from I think we have the discussion in the movie, but the idea that, I just love this idea of a horror film being set on a film set. We didn't have the budget to make it like a big film set, but I love the idea of a director being the villain. Um, And so I wrote a short film that we didn't make. And then during the pandemic, we basically discovered that there was a funny version of a director that just can't really make a horror film. So that became this meta movie that we created. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. Yeah. And also an endeavor in the pandemic to to want to be creative and to want to make something when, just we were surrounded by creatives who were sitting around wanting to do something. And so we were like, okay, let's see if we can make this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that because that's sort of the vibe I get from the film is that I mean, obviously the film is people spending time together making a film. Um, but what was that vibe like on set? Was there improvisation? Was it all on the page? Like, were you making it up as you going along? I really wondered.
We essentially kind of improvised and rehearsed like a play.
Hmm.
But nothing was ever on the page in that same way. I mean, it was written down, but it wasn't, nobody had to follow any sort of script, essentially.
Almost.
Almost. There are scenes that we needed to like make sure that things were happening, and then the rest of it was we'd be playful with it. But I think that was kind of like the fun of it was that it felt I wanted to get as close to a documentary as possible, because I think there's a lot of magic in those little performance moments where somebody doesn't know what someone else is saying, and even just the you know the whole concept of the film should be a director that's potentially not letting his
Manipulating
actor,
people.
yeah. So we wanted to keep it just on that line of being like everyone's,
But you did, Jeremy and Matt did write, you kind of wrote the film out like as a sort of a beat sheet essentially. And it was very important, because we thought, oh, well, we'll just improvise the whole thing. And then as we started working on it, it became very clear, like you had to write the beats
yeah,
that we needed to hit. Otherwise, it's too meta, there are too many layers, the story is too confusing. There were bits that we were like, oh no, we have to make that clear. And so in rehearsal, we worked it and worked it to
yeah,
the
yeah.
point where then you started like writing down, okay, this is going to be what it's going to be. And then once we got to set, like some of those things changed a bit, but we needed very much that blueprint
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
work around, essentially.
Well, one of that honestly, that's part of the joy of this film is that it feels so authentic. And I'm looking back, I'm dating myself when I say this, but a film like The Blair Witch Project had the sort of not ground shifting in the same way that Anchoretta does, but you never quite feel at ease with what's going on because it just feels like it's happening naturally, and that's what's going on here, or at least it seems to be, which I think really helps the thing come alive.
That's great that you got that from it. And I mean, I think actually naturally for us, like we were just saying, there were moments in it where, because it was so meta, we were using all our names, and um we had to be you described it as like peeling the onion layers back, like which layer of reality are we in now? And some characters were in, I'm in this onion layer, whereas you're in that one because you know what's and so that did at moments get quite confusing. But hopefully, yeah, served to make it feel like it was kind of happening organically. Yeah.
I did wonder that because this feels like the sort of film, because of the nature of its storytelling, that it would be difficult to keep up with while you're shooting, because where are the lines between reality and fiction? Of course, we know obviously there's fiction in the story, but it must have been a challenge to try and find that balance as you were working together on set.
Yeah, it was like funnily enough, it was actually quite easy. I think we all understood what we were getting into as far as, nothing was ever confusing about who was actually being the jerk or what was actually happening. We all knew. But there were moments at like in the first chunk when we filmed, there was just a couple of moments where I was like redirecting her in a scene, and it didn't make the final cut, but it was me basically being like, "Cut, can you just like talk about me like I'm more handsome or like whatever it was?" And one of the ADs was just outside being like, "Geez, he's a real insecure jerk," And I basically had to like sit down and be like, "Okay, guys, everybody needs to understand that if I say cut, it basically doesn't mean cut." And so then we had to kind of essentially
We had to
we had to make
have
like
a code. This means cut,
this
touching your head. Like
means
that
real,
actually means cut.
yeah. But if I say cut, like nobody should actually turn off anything.
Yeah.
So it did get confusing for a bit.
That's awesome. That's so wild. And I wanted to ask you about the meta voice to this film because as I'm watching it, I mean, we see meta is popular in some films before, but a film like this really sort of puts it in the forefront, on trial all the time. And it made me think about, we sort of have a relationship of trust with the viewer, and the sort of I was just thinking about like any movie I've seen the last week pretty well, we just sort of trust that the storyteller is telling us the truth. But this is a sort of film that gives you that and then pulls the rug out from under you multiple times.
Yeah.
What was
It's
that
true.
like trying to create, I should say?
Ooh.
I mean, confusing. And I think it was definitely a conversation of like, how do we do this without alienating the audience? Like you don't want the audience to get irritated because they can't get a grasp on what it is that they're doing or what it is that they're watching, sorry. And I think that within that, we were like, well, this is the film that we're making, so we're going to go with it. But I think hopefully it was the idea that as characters, we were all sort of scrabbling the truth of the characters themselves, kind of scrabbling to get a grip on what the reality was too, that hopefully the audience would just sort of go along with the ride and trust it. But yeah, I mean, for sure, that was that was a conversation, and yeah.
And I think my brother Benjamin, he edited it, and he was kind of a good voice. I think sometimes in conversation about being like, what you don't want is that it was all a dream
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
That like trope of like, and nothing was real, and then you're kind of like it just giving basically flipping the bird to the viewer of being like, if nothing was real,
Why did we watch this?
then why did we watch it?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
screw you. But the unreliable narrator was like an interesting concept, and to try to find the balance of what me as the director and then also the weird meta director can play around with. Um, it gets tricky. Like my favorite scene is like when I'm apologizing and we see like that it was a fake dead cat.
Yeah. In the
I
freezer? Yeah.
Yeah, like to me, that's like where kind of the crux of the movie lies, is this idea of being like, we're gonna suspend your belief for a second and then show how I've manipulated it essentially, or you
Yeah.
essentially did. But that was like a tightrope to walk.
I mean, it's a good question, honestly. Like when we weren't initially sure that it would work, we hoped it would work, and we hoped that, like, we within that could still make the storytelling clear enough that the viewer by the end would be like, okay, I get it and I'm with you. But it was a gamble for sure. Yeah. Right.
It works. It works. It's fun.
Great.
As I'm watching it too, one of the things that, and maybe this, I'm not going to use the term meta, but maybe this is a difficult question to ask. But for your characters, there's this constant play between, especially for you, Antonia, whether or not you can trust Jeremy about what's going on, because there's this, your character's going along for the ride and fighting the ride and in the ride, all sort of at the same time. Which, as I'm watching the film, sort of led me to a broader question, which was, do you think that we can ever really know another person? Because there's so much things happening with these characters, and everybody's playing their cards close to their vest.
Oh my God, yeah, good question. I mean, yeah, I mean, the broader question is, do you think you can ever really know another person? I think you can hope that you can know another
That's a
person.
deeper question.
But like, yeah, I mean, I think everyone has their own secret garden, don't they, always in life, that they're kind of tending to and doing, and I think, yeah, I mean, in regards to my character in the piece, well, she goes along thinking, or we think that because essentially at the end of it we know that she's been in on the whole thing, but like we think that she goes along and she thinks it's one thing and she trusts him and they're just gonna make a little film, and she doesn't even know what it's going to be. Essentially it's just like hanging out with some friends, and then it just starts to kind of unravel. And yeah, I mean,
And on a real meta level, she made this movie with me and also didn't know what she was getting
yeah,
involved in.
it was like, are we gonna do this? Yeah, okay, we're gonna
It's basically just a documentary.
yeah, I mean that. And interestingly, like the process of making it, it really felt like we were saying this, like kind of almost film summer camp. None of us we're all filmmakers, actors. You're a writer, you've made short films before. None of us had made a feature. I'd never like tried to produce anything before, like it was really it was that really meta in that regard. We kind of got to this location and we were making a film and then making the film. And then, it was just like, it was a bit of a mind kind of like.
Yeah, there was some
Some
games going on.
In moments.
And luckily we all survived.
Yeah, we all survived and we were friends and we all
Was
had a
that
great time. That's the thing. It was
was
great.
that the scariest part of filming, is whether or not you all don't kill each other while you're in this isolated
I mean,
location?
that was like our big worry, was just being like, are we all going to still become friends after this? Like, and we just like, I think, funnily enough, making a movie that was supposed to be about this horrible set was like probably the best time I've ever had on set.
Yeah.
So ironically, we walked away being like trying to make basically ANACORETA 2.
Yeah, it was very fun. We had a great time.
I love that. I love that because, like I said, this feels like the sort of film that would be a joy to be a part of, even amidst the challenges and just sort of piecing these things together. Yeah, you can sense that. But anyway, I appreciate so much the chance to chat with you both. Thank you so much for the time.
Of
As
course, dude.
Thank you for watching our movie.
Absolutely. I hope
Such
others
a
do as well. I really would love others to check this out as well. It's a ton of fun,
thank
honestly.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you
Amazing.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.